Hey everyone, welcome back to the Craftsman's Guide. I'm Cameron and today we're going to be building these modular mushrooms with interchangeable heads. I'm really happy with how they turned out and I'm going to show you how you can make them. Let's get to it. Wah! Like most of my projects, I went into this build with no idea what I wanted to make. After fiddling with some scraps, I decided on mushrooms, so I grabbed this chipboard and began to cut it out to make bases. This material is a really good base because it's heavy, it's strong, it doesn't warp, and it takes paint really well. Then I moved on to making the stalk. I always keep a mini on hand so that I can size it up and keep things relatively to scale. The next step was rounding out these square edges to make the circular stalks. I tend to go from corner to corner, trimming off the sharp edges, and eventually as you go round it'll end up circular. Once that the stalks were nice and cylindrical, I used the knife to create a grain in the stalks. Nature's never perfect and linear, so I made sure to wobble my lines a bit to give it a more of a natural feel. I then went in with a pen and thickened out those lines. As for the mushroom heads, I did a similar thing with the stalks. Grabbed a piece of scrap and began to cut it a lot more circular. To get the convex shape of the mushroom's head, I just started from the center and carved at an angle to the outside, not forgetting to smooth out those sharp edges. While I was detailing the head of the mushroom, I had the idea to make this modular. When I'm crafting, I want to get the most use out of it that I can, and especially something like scatter terrain that could be used a lot, I really like it to be modular. So I had the idea to make the heads interchangeable to be overworld, underdark, whatever you need. So reaching for my trusty toothpicks, I carved off the heads, poked them into the stalks, made a little hole in the middle of the heads, and then placed them so that they could be changed. So now that I've got a good idea of what I actually want to do for the mushrooms, we need to go in and begin to carve them up. It's going to take a little bit of time because I want to do the interchangeable heads, I want to do some underdark, some overworld, and a couple of different other styles. I'm going to grab some foam, I'm going to begin carving, get some different shapes, get some variety, add some detail, and just lose myself into the craft. But first, we're going to need some music. Personally, I think that adding variety really changes up the depth and character in a build. So I went online and looked at a couple different types of mushrooms. I found these conical ones, added some frills, added some small, some medium, some large mushrooms, and just really went for it. I'm going to show you how. For the conical mushrooms, I grabbed a piece of foam and just began to carve it at different angles, making sure to arc my blade through the foam. To smooth out some of the rough edges and squish them to give it a more natural look, I just use my finger to press in the foam and squish the heads. This is an easy way to add lips and smooth edges to your foam. To make the frills, I used the offcuts from the larger mushroom heads and just cut them down to a much smaller size, curved them, textured them, and then glued them on. As for the rest of the mushroom, I just grabbed the foam and carved it down to a shape which I liked, making sure to arc the foam, make edges, make lips, and just give it a bit of variety and character.
And now that the actual carving of the bases is complete and all the mushroom stems are set out, I'm really happy with how we've set out the mushrooms in different styles and different types. I think it adds a lot of different detail using conical and a couple of witch hattie style mushrooms just to really break it up and give it a lot of detail. Now the next step is to go in and add ground texture using gravel and then some flocking to add a vegetation aspect to this. Once that's all laid down and dried out, we can move on to painting. I'm really keen to see how this turns out. Let's get to it!
I like to make my ground cover by laying down PVA and then covering it in a rocky sand. I seal it in using Mod Podge, which has brown paint mixed in. This also adds a base coat. As we get into the painting, I want to apologise for any of the scenes to have a bit weird lighting. It was raining non-stop in Melbourne and my lighting setup is not up to scratch. But thanks to my patrons, that'll be changing very soon. But nonetheless, we're heading into the painting and we're laying down a grey base coat for the stone. And while that's still drying, I add in a leaf green onto the ground to create a sort of mossy undertone. If you want less vegetation and a bit more of a rocky sort of surface, then you can leave it just like this. And now it's time to move on to the mushroom stems. I started out by painting some of them with this sort of fleshy peach tone. And to add variety, I wanted to paint the others with a dry brush of bleached titanium for a lighter surface. In the end, the application didn't really turn out how I wanted. And the dry brushing didn't really turn out how I wanted, so I actually ended up picking it up and I decided that I needed to fix it. So I grabbed the paintbrush and just covered up my mistake. I like to say in crafting there are no mistakes, just features, and in this case the extra layer actually added texture and a bit of tone to them. After the dry brushing kerfuffle, I decided to paint the rest of them using washes. So I grabbed some water, some dishwashing detergent and some paint and mixed up some washes. I focused the greens primarily on the lighter mushrooms and then added a little bit of brown and add a little bit of green to the brown darker toned mushrooms. I focused the brown wash on the top of the mushrooms to help them transition into the mushroom heads. And now that the washes are all dry, it's time to move on to the vegetation. So I added PVA to the ground, spread it around, got some fine flocking from Woodland Scenics, some coarse flocking from Woodland Scenics, and spread them around, not forgetting the edges and also adding some to climb up the sides of the stalks. And while that dries, it's time to move on to painting the mushroom heads. I grabbed a variety of paints and separated the heads into Overworld, Underdark, and these pustule sort of gross ones. I created an ombre effect on a number of the mushrooms using 3 different tones. I applied them while they were very wet in very large amounts, and then I grabbed a wet brush and just began to blend them together. I won't show you how I painted each and every mushroom head because this is up to you. No matter what you do, they will look awesome. They're mushrooms, they can be whatever color and shape you want. Make them yours. And here's all the mushroom heads all painted up. I'm really happy with how they turned out and I have a huge variety of different situations where they would look amazing. And now it's time to take a look at them all put together. Thank you all for watching this video, I really appreciate it and I hope you learned something from it and can make some really amazing builds for your tables. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing, leaving a comment down below what you want to see, liking the video, sharing it around, whatever you want to do. And I just wanted to finish up by saying a huge thank you to my patron. They help me cover the basic costs of this crafting, and one day I want to turn this into a career, and they help that happen. You can check it out in the link below. As always, I will see you on the next adventure.